Everybody, welcome back to the Tech Intersect Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tanya Evans, and today we have a really special guest whose expertise sits at the fascinating intersection of user experience, product strategy, and business development. Tyreek Houston joins us to share his insights on transforming ideas into successful products and strategies. With over a decade of experience in crafting compelling user experiences and driving product strategies that resonate with markets, Tyreek has made his mark as a thought leader in the tech space, and he's not just a strategist. He's a storyteller. He's a connector, an educator who has guided numerous clients through the intricate dance of user research and business growth. And today we're going to dive into the methods and philosophies that drive his work in the user experience. We will talk about all of that and more in a moment. But first, Tyreek, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tanya. That intro is amazing, by the way. I feel extremely honored and humbled and welcome to be able to be on your platform to hopefully share a lot of value and add a few gems to all of your listeners, especially those who are interested in not only Web3, but user experience research.
Yeah, I think you're going to help a lot of folks here, including myself. As I was doing the prep for this conversation, I was really taken about the intricacies and the importance at a technical level and also at a high level of user experience and how that translates from, the engagement with the product and the product design and all that goes in on the front end. But all of it is for naught if it doesn't work for the end user. So before we hop in kind of into the importance of user research, talk about your professional journey. You've had an extensive career in user research, product strategy. So share a bit about your journey and what led you to specialize in these areas.
Yeah. So my story and my journey, I think is, pretty unconventional, much like most other user experience research professionals. Because as it stands right now, there is no degree that you can get for user experience research. So the question is, well, how did you make your way into this field? I think it's by connecting with people and also connecting the dots in your life to understand the problems that you want to solve, not just for yourself, but for communities at large. So I studied exercise science originally at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. Shout out to RU. And, I was on track to graduate early and everything up until my senior year. I had a internship at Princeton University as a strength and conditioning coach. And naturally, I built connections with all of my coaches. And I remember the first day of the internship, they told me, you're going to have to really love this field in order to stay in it. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I hope we get a chance to revisit this because I'm not understanding right now. So fast forward to the end of the internship, we had a very great candid conversation. Me and all three of the coaches there. I came to learn that the head strength and conditioning coach only made $38,000 per year and
Mm.
had a family on top of that with two kids and two part-time jobs. His assistants also had part-time jobs and families to support. So for me, the math wasn't mathing. I'm
Right.
like, wait, so not only do I have to get a master's degree and put myself in more debt, but I'm going to come out making a salary that is under 50K? That makes no sense. Yes, I like what I'm doing, but when I learned that, it was in that moment that what that coach said to me day one of the internship made sense,
Mm.
right? And what he was saying to me in hindsight is that the cost is going to weigh more than the
Right.
benefits. So, I went back to the drawing board. My senior year, I'm about to graduate, and I started to ask myself, what could I do that was not only fulfilling, but will also be able to support the quality of life that I want to live? And I came back to tech. I was always that tech guy for my friends, for my family. I built my first tower computer at the age of 8.
Mm.
And, I was like, I wonder if Rutgers University has a tech program. Lord behold, they did. So my senior year, I made the switch. I
Mm.
switched from exercise science to information technology, stayed for an extra year, took 18 credits per semester for an entire year,
Wow.
all to graduate on time. Because remember, I was on track to graduate early. I was a year ahead. So I still graduated on time, but before graduation approached, I understood that the program that I was immersed into, it gave me a broad exposure of what I could do in tech. It didn't necessarily allow me to understand what I wanted to hone in on or what I wanted to differentiate myself with. So I started looking into graduate programs at Rutgers. And the one program that stood out to me was the Library and Information Science program.
Mm.
That program was the intersection of community, technology, and people, right?
Right.
People with respect to communication. How does the intersection of all three of these sectors come together to create technology that's beneficial for communities at large?
Right.
So that was something that really resonated with me. And also because it wasn't super technical. I'm not the most technical guy. Yes, I had to go through, programming, Python, Java. I passed, but I wouldn't say that was something that I love to do.
Mhm.
So that program really stood out to me, and I applied myself, connected with the right people again, and managed to get into that graduate program before I graduated undergrad. Fast forward to me going right into grad school.
Mm.
I remember the first course that I took. It was called the Experimental Design and Evaluation of Technology. That was my exposure to the user experience field as a whole. We did everything underneath the UX sun, from learning how to craft conversation guides, learning how to conduct interviews, conducting contextual inquiries, analyzing data, making affinity diagrams,
Mm.
synthesizing the data, and then coming up with problem statements and solutions to help solve some of the themes that we were seeing emerging from the data, to creating prototypes that were interactive, going out, testing those prototypes, seeing if it added value. And all of the information that we learned in that course was so valuable to me that I actually did not have to study. I actually became the teacher's pet. I was
I love
helping,
that. The
I
teacher
was
in
helping,
me honors the teacher pet in you.
I was helping other people understand the concepts in the course.
Mm.
And one thing led to another. And eventually I had a one-on-one with my professor. I wanted to know, how could we apply what we're doing in this course in the real world? Is there a job title? Is there a broader field? And she was so happy that I took the initiative to set up that one-on-one time with her, that I actually came to learn that she used to be an interaction designer at Carnegie Mellon University. That was my initial exposure to UX field as a whole on a professional sense.
Mm.
She educated me for about 1 hour, and the information that I took away was invaluable.
Mm.
I was so inspired that I actually ended up creating my first independent research study, and she was my advisor for it, all at the university, which is now published in 3 different journals. I was really interested in massive open online platforms known as MOOCs.
Mhm.
In particular, how do underprivileged and underrepresented individuals, specifically Black people in New Jersey, become aware of these platforms? Because the existing literature was saying that there's so many benefits of using MOOCs. You can increase your salary, you can get a new job, you can, start your own venture. And none of the literature really highlighted what the demographic of these people were,
Mm.
let alone define what a student was, right? Because the notion was that it was just students using these platforms, but none of the literature defined what a student was.
Mm.
So I took it a step further to define what a student was at Rutgers University, segmented to one particular state, and targeted with a specific salary, background, and also location.
Mhm.
And what I found in my study was substantially different from what existing literature was saying. So
Or
the
not saying,
student,
right?
and not saying, right? The people in my study, I interviewed 10 students from Rutgers, 10 black students from Rutgers. 80% of them only found out about MOOCs like Lynda or Coursera or Udemy
Hmm.
because they had an academic challenge in the classroom.
And wanted to
The
supplement what they were learning with the MOOC.
Exactly, exactly. And the other 20% found out about it because it was part of their onboarding process for an internship that they had
Interesting.
secured,
Right.
right? And the outcomes or the benefits that they received from MOOCs highlighted even more disparities from what the existing literature was saying,
Right.
right? So what I found was that the participants in my study, they were able to overcome the academic challenges that they were facing from MOOCs. Tangibly, they were also able to gain academic credit towards their degree.
Mm.
And the other 20%, they were able to obtain a professional certification after completing their onboarding process with the internship to help them obtain a job or to give them an edge in obtaining a job,
Right. A
as
leg
opposed
up.
to getting a promotion in a job or starting a new career or starting their own business.
Hmm.
Those three things, if you really think about it, doesn't really identify with a student in historical context. So
Right.
that was really important to me. And building on that, I also thought about how could I help students at my university not only understand what these massive open online courses are, but how can you take advantage of the resources that we currently have. And one of the resources that I had in undergrad, we didn't have as graduate students.
Mm.
And that was a platform called Degree Navigator, which is basically a platform that helps you manage your degree progress. Now, why would that tool not be accessible for graduate students, but accessible for undergrads?
Right.
So, putting on everything that I learned from my first course, diving deep into my UX fundamentals, I actually did my first case study on that platform, which led to the university granting access to graduate students for that particular platform.
You're out here changing lives.
I'm out here changing lives. And that's what UX is all about, right? So one thing that I actually skipped over is that when I started grad school, I was also working full time.
Mm.
So
So
working
many
full,
people. That's like the untold story for people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of people are like, how did you do that?
Mm.
Or why did you do it? Well, the reality is I didn't have a choice.
Hmm.
You get more funding as an undergrad than you do as a graduate student. And if you were a part-time grad student like me, everything came completely out of pocket.
Right.
But
Right.
the one thing that, I can say is that the mentors that I had in undergrad, they emphasized the importance of being prepared to graduate as opposed to graduating and then trying to get set up for life.
Yeah. It's kind of it has to be, particularly in the fast moving tech space. And just, it seems like life is moving at a meteoric pace at this point. No
Mm-hmm.
one has the luxury of time, which is actually the only finite resource that I can, other than Bitcoin, reasonably identify, right? It's like maybe we
Yeah.
can always be creative and create new opportunities. Time,
Mhm.
as far as we understand it in our humanness, is finite. And the space between I have my education, now I get a job, and then I learn on the job so that someday I get a promotion is a thing of the past. That is like very 20th century. And
Mm-hmm.
so you are raising a number of things of interest, and I hope you all are catching these gems, catching the gems that Tyreek is sharing about the non-traditional student, the opportunities early and often to build as you fly, the importance of mentorship, the importance of lifting as you climb, and making opportunities available. What you did was you added 10x value because you compressed the amount of time that it would take to go through the same path as you.
Mhm.
because you were discovering you had angels in your life kind of sowing into you, and your efforts then changed the trajectory for other people who didn't have to do 26 steps. Now they can do
Mhm.
things in 4 or 5. So that's
Yep.
extraordinary value that's added and connected to an area where, you also mentioned early on that there wasn't a specific path, track, degree. What you later found out is that you can kind of curate the idea of a title, but you
Mhm.
along the way are collecting all of these experiences and leveraging relationships, but also you're proactive. My sense of you as we continue to get to know each other is you're also a lifelong learner. Like
Mhm.
you're building whole computers at 8, right?
Yeah.
And then the inquiry for you, the professor who became your mentor, to go a step further. That's a both and strategy. Educators sewing into students, but students being proactive, intellectually curious, and leaning into the possibility. Um, I love so much about your origin story, which is really sounds more like a hero's journey to me as well. We'll talk about some challenges in a moment, but
Mm.
talk about why first define what user research is in your particular discipline, and then why user research is critical in the development of new technologies, especially in emerging fields like Web3 and this fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah. So that's a really good segue also. Working in different industries in UX, I think it can sometimes taint what UX is in its core. Me working in health tech for 4 years, then gov tech for 3 years, and now Web3 since 2021. It can all look different because you're solving different problems. And in graduate school, I had the privilege to study underneath the distinguished professor Nicholas Belkin.
Mm,
And user experience is new now, but this is something that people were doing in the 90s, in the late 80s,
for sure.
and it's all rooted in information retrieval. So, by definition, if it's rooted in information retrieval, then it's the study of how information is retrieved,
Mm,
right? But now that we have new technologies, it's not just the study of how information is retrieved, it's the study of how technology enables people to retrieve information, right? And the way that I like to define user experience, it's the the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, your entire experience when you're interacting with an information communication technology,
mm,
whether if it's an iPad, an iPhone, a computer, and it extends beyond technology to services as well, right? Let's use Disney as a classic example, right? Um, Disney historically has a lot of foot traction, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming being surrounded by that many people. But when you have a lot of foot traffic, we have to create a way that allows people to navigate easily. Disney cracked the code with allowing people to easily navigate into the park and around the park, right? Their line system is now institutionalized into pretty much every line system that we know,
mm,
from public transportation to the airports,
mm,
right? They all learned from Walt Disney's way of handling foot traffic. And if it wasn't for Walt Disney, you can imagine, when it comes to getting on an airplane, it would be chaos. If you're a Disney fan, it would be chaos trying to get into the park. But it's not as chaotic anymore because they learned how to make it more efficient for people to accomplish their goal,
mm,
right? And goal attainment or goal accomplishment is, one of the core pillars when it comes to UX.
Mm.
How easy can we allow people to accomplish their goal, whether they're using a product or service? And what can we do to improve making that goal even easier? Whether if it's, shedding a second or a microsecond away from allowing somebody to accomplish their goal. Those microseconds matter, right? The attention span of people are not the same as what it once was, right? You only get one chance to make a first impression. And, that's fundamental in UX. And, working in Web3, I think UX is definitely one of the catalysts for adoption, right? I think we can definitely do a better job at it. Not just improving the interactions or the experiences or the task completion of people in Web3, but making it more inclusive,
Right.
including more people in the Web3 space,
Right.
particularly Black and Brown folks.
Do you find that to
One
be
of
one
the
of the challenges? Because you're speaking about Web3, so I want to kind of pause there and explore this a bit more
Mhm.
in the context of challenges. The output is only as good as the input, and when the input is not coming from diverse backgrounds and experiences, race and ethnicity is one, but it could be something as simple as geography or religious conviction, age, stage of life, right? So the idea of inclusion, although it's kind of compartmentalized in the United States, actually takes on greater breadth and depth in the context of UX. But
Mhm.
and not even but there are infinite challenges in terms of inclusion from Black and Brown communities in particular, particularly in this evolving sector. It makes me think of like the classic example of, and I travel a lot, water faucets in bathrooms that, because of my brown skin, were not reactive, and so the water wouldn't come out. Simple but important things
Mhm.
that user experiences is tainted in that regard if the research, the analysis, the testing doesn't focus on diversity and the input of experience. So can you talk about that in those specific challenges in the UX world?
Yeah, that I think that is one of the most undervalued and overlooked things in the UX space,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Classic example. Let's go back to 2019, when H&M put a little black boy in a sweater that said "coolest monkey in the jungle."
My Lord.
It's things like that that not only highlights the lack of inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
but the lack of research as well, right? Since then, H&M has lost the loyalty of a $3.2 trillion market, and they have not been able to recover in the North American region since. Right? So it's things like that that can't be overlooked
Right.
because it's so valuable. If the intention is to market to this particular demographic, our
Mm-hmm.
demographic, Black people, brown people, then you need to include them before things hit the market, before things
Right.
go public. You need to gather their feedback. You need to understand their perceptions. You need to understand their opinions, their feelings, their attitudes, right? Because that's how you deliver immediate value.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you properly serve people, right? That's how you give people products and services that they want and that they will actually use. The old days of creating things in sort of a waterfall methodology where you just produce, put on a shelf and see if people buy it, those days are over.
Right.
We have too much technology at our disposal. We have too many people connected through social media and through other platforms where we can give authentic reviews like Yelp or Google reviews
Mm-hmm.
that this demystify the notion of being able to create anything.
Right.
And it's very important to shed light on that and to advocate for that continuously. And that's something that I do myself working in Web3,
Mm.
because it's there's no fundamental practice or fundamental policy that mandates that you have to talk to diverse individuals.
Right.
And if you look at the demographics of the tech field, it's fundamentally ruled and dominated by white men. And a lot of the products and services in the tech field that exist right now are tailored towards the dominant demographic. So unless there's, a policy change that mandates for more diversity and more inclusion in research practices or in UX, you have to be the advocate for other people.
Right.
You have to be the champion for the people.
Right.
And, I think that's one of the things that Darren Hood actually speaks about. He is a Black UX researcher that has been in the UX space since the early 90s. And he champions the inclusion of diverse people in research, but also acknowledges the decline of core competencies in the space,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not just enough to, study UX or to learn about user research from a boot camp, right? You have to go way beyond that,
Right.
because what you learn in theory doesn't always play out practically. And if you don't have the muscle to flex to be more than a UX researcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be more than somebody that sits behind a screen. If you don't have the muscle to step into the space of being an advocate or the space of being an anthropologist,
Mm.
then ultimately you're not just doing yourself a disservice, you're also contributing to the problem of the field, which is diminishing the quality of user researchers. So it's very important. I don't think it's just a one-dimensional problem or one-dimensional challenge. I think it's multifaceted. But, we are looking for those people who are, capable of flexing their muscles to go beyond sitting behind the computer desk, to go into the field, to champion people, to be an anthropologist, to build communities, to step into communities, to learn how communities, govern themselves and are comfortable with abiding by their guidelines or their community governance,
Mm.
and, building trust while also being able to reciprocate respect. So, that is one of the things that I think can create a high quality researcher. Not just for people who are aspiring to be user researchers, but this is also for people who are already in the field as well.
You're looking for leadership. That a time such as now is calling for leadership,
I think you're on
particularly
mute,
as a
Tanya.
matter of the bottom line. It's kind of famous or maybe infamous at this
I
point
think you're
to
on mute,
say,
Tanya.
sorry?
I think you're on mute.
No, I don't know what happened because I see
Let's
my
see.
bars moving. I see my bars moving. It's responding. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So I'll pick up from my punch-in point. So what we're looking for is, and I'm hearing feedback on your end, and I'm not quite sure. Hold on. I want to pause to make sure that there's no interference. I'm hearing myself. Okay. So you're on. Don't know why we had to do that because we had a good thing going there for a second. And we have just about 5 minutes, so I'm going to get us to the end here too. My speaker, my Yeti, and you. My Yeti is still on. I don't know what happened. You'll have to tell me. We need a third person on our team.
Tech problems.
Exactly. We must be speaking the truth.
Right. It
I
always
want the
happens.
truth. All right, so I'm going to pick it up from here. So what you're talking about is really leadership. And also what you described, this idea about we're talking about inclusion at every step along the way because the user experience is multifaceted. It's not monolithic. So even unfortunately, if the tech community is largely monolith, kind of at the top of the quote unquote food chain, user experience shouldn't be. And you use this great example with H&M losing a lion's share of its business with one boneheaded move. I'm sorry that we would even have to expect kind of diverse voice around the table where the decisions were made, particularly in the 21st century, but that's a podcast for another day. But even if people don't change their personal views, bottom line is a lack of inclusion and diversity is bad for business. And so we can all, black, brown, white, what we all can at least appreciate, I think, if you are in business, would be green. And so that leads me to kind of my final question around growth and business development, because your role also involves business development, obviously. So how do this is a good segue to the previous point, how do you integrate user research and product strategy to drive business growth? You started down that path, but let's put a finer point on it. And then I'll ask you about the future of UX after that.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue. Um, User research and business development, they go hand in hand, right? Oftentimes, insights gathered through research informs or validates, or sometimes invalidates business development, right? Um, Business development, in the most simplest form, is a way of, or tactics and strategies to help businesses grow. Um, you know, grow their revenue, grow their customer base, grow all around. And that is normally determined by some facet of the business that has more demand than others,
Mm,
right? Whether if that facet exists or doesn't exist. And the ways that I would say mature businesses de-risk their decisions is by leveraging user research to strategize, galvanize, synthesize, and sort of disseminate information and insight that they gather to the business development team, sometimes PMs, in rare cases, leadership, depending on how high stakes the initiative may be, in order to help business leaders make more informed, data driven decisions. So, as an example, let's say that, a Web3 company wants to integrate a new feature that helps consumers leverage cryptocurrency purchase merchandise from an online retailer.
mm,
Well, that's a good thought, but is that in demand? Is that something that people actually want? Is that solving a problem? Is that something that people need? The business development team isn't equipped to answer that question, but working with user researchers as partners, we can go out there and gather that information. We can help the business development team structure their problem statement into something that's more valuable and concise, as opposed to something that's broad and sometimes inconsistent.
right.
We can also, qualify if the idea is relevant to be researched or not,
Right.
right? Because not all questions are research questions.
Fair. I've not thought of it that way, but fair.
Right?
Excellent point.
And sometimes, new research doesn't have to be done. You can leverage existing research, whether if it's public or private. It all depends on how recent and how relevant it is. So, user research and business development, it goes hand in hand.
So where are we going from here? Where do you see the role of UX and user research heading in the next 5 years? I can't even venture to guess 10 years, because more will change in the next 2 years than in the previous 10, particularly with the integration of AI, machine learning technologies, and et cetera.
Yeah, that is amazing. I'm personally fascinated by AI. I've been an AI user ever since ChatGPT first came out.
Mhm.
And, with respect to where user experience is going in the next 5 years, I think that we will finally, as an as a field,
Mhm.
I think we will enter a state of um, hyper acceleration with the assistance of AI, right? There's a lot of in demand companies and in demand services, particularly for research and design, but there's not enough talent to
Right.
fill that void. If you look at the job market, a lot of the research jobs and design jobs that are available right now, they're senior and above,
Mm.
right? Like the days of entry level or junior level right now in this current state of the economy, it's not looking too good. But um, there's not enough senior talent or director talent to fill the gaps that are in demand right now. But AI can help to assist that, right? And I think the key differentiator for anybody that's currently in the field is being knowledgeable and skilled with prompt engineering,
Mm.
right? Asking the right questions, being articulate with your words, and being able to explain in detail with the proper context what you're looking to get out of it, right? As you said earlier, the output is only as good as the input. If
Right.
your input is trash,
Output's garbage.
exactly. So I think we're going to enter, a period of hyper acceleration with design and research services. Um, with that, naturally, I do think there will be a lot of drop off or churn with companies,
Mhm.
in particular, people who have not equipped themselves with the skill sets of prompt engineering yet, or who don't know how to properly utilize AI. But I think once that void is cleared, then that creates new opportunities for entry level and junior level um, people to enter the job market, right?
Mhm.
You'll have, senior and director folks more so doing high stakes work, with entry level and junior or mid level folks working more closely with PMs doing low stakes works. So
And PMs are project or product manager.
it
Is
can be both. It can
okay.
be project or product managers in the UX field. The lines are so close together. There's a very fine line to differentiate the two.
Back.
Hmm. So that's where I think we'll be in the next 5 years. In the next 10 years, for me, I think we'll see uh, AI products or AI services that can create entire applications from one person being skilled at, prompt engineering.
Right.
Entire organizations, entire services that is single-handedly ran by one person and AI agents.
Fascinated by this. I have to have you come back later this fall because I want to talk specifically about prompt engineering. I
Mm,
am having a lot of fun, even though I want to sometimes pull my hair out, trying to, not trying, but literally training
mm,
is available now, and specifically in my lane of crypto law. So having kind
mm,
of like a little, Professor Evans in your proverbial pocket with
mm-hmm.
my GPT. So learning about training and prompting, the questions that I would have just appear to get people started and engaged. It's really fascinating, and I'm not a technologist by any stretch of the imagination, but I am that lifelong learner. I
Mm-hmm.
may not build a computer, but I was always the first to have the latest, whatever that was. Back in my
I
day,
hear
I'm not going
that.
to age
Mm-hmm.
myself with the original Atari and Intellivision because that's my business. but I do find this entire world fascinating. Prompt is life changing, and you have the right prompts to get the right output. But it's only also as good as your ability to, you mentioned, articulate your words, but also have your own mental and professional database of information to take a list, to take an idea, and to transform it. So, and I tell my students all the time, use technology early and often, but know what you're doing with it. Otherwise, one, you'll all be talking to each other with the same output, and that's garbage. And you will lose your ability to critically think. And a lot of critical thinking goes into prompting. I'm fascinated. So let's have you come back and talk specifically about that. And Tyreek Houston, I thank you so much for coming on the show as well, because I've gained personally a lot of insight to the world of user experience. And I hope that you also have teaching in your future, because the way that you just distill really complex concepts into a very digestible format is going to help a lot of people. So please let people know how they can learn more about you and your work. And then we've got to have you back on.
Oh yeah, I would love to come back on and unpack some of the complex things related to artificial intelligence. It was definitely a privilege and an honor being here with you, Dr. Evans. Really appreciate it, and being able to speak to your audience about me, myself, my journey, the intersections of UX and Web3. And for anybody that would like to follow me or connect with me, my social media handle is at Reek the Creative, REEK the Creative, on all platforms. I'm most active on Instagram, so feel free to shoot me a DM, and I'll reply as soon as possible. And on the note of teaching, I actually do have a book out there. So I am a published
I did
author.
not include that in my lead up.
That is okay. I'm a published author. It's called Curiosity Did Not Kill the Cat, and it is a memoir that journeys down some of my life experiences and leverages when I use curiosity to overcome obstacles and adversity, and really ultimately helping people utilize manifestation techniques as a form of self-help. So feel free to check that out. It's available on Amazon. You can order it as a paperback or Kindle. And again, feel free to connect with me. Always looking to connect with people who are, like-minded in the tech field, interested in Web3 or interested in UX. I'm an open book, just like my book.
I love it. Oh, I see what you did right there. All right, people, we'll drop all of those links in the show notes. Run, do not walk to pick up a copy of Curiosity Did Not Kill the Cat. This brother has a lot of just brilliant things going on. I feel really honored to have this conversation with you. I look forward to the next opportunity to do so. You're a Renaissance man, and I appreciate you. Thank you, Tyreek.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. I appreciate you.